In Washington, we have a disease, or a syndrome rather. I call it the dinosaur syndrome. Big hearts, small brains.
This is raw footage of Hurricane Harvey, the hurricane that ravaged Texas in early September 2017. Watching the aftermath, there is no doubt that the people in Texas are in need of disaster relief. What is truly sad, though, is that the American people as a whole have long been in need of disaster relief. Don't hold your breath that such relief is coming. Greedy politicians line their pockets with the wealth created by hard-working Americans. They not only rob money from us, they rob money and wealth from our children and our grandchildren by running up enormous debts. This is a running U.S. debt clock. The U.S. national debt is currently approaching $20 trillion. Trillion with a T. That's $61,000 in debt per citizen and $165,000 in debt per taxpayer. U.S. federal spending continues to increase, as always, the largest budget items being Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, defense, war, which seems to never end, income security, interest on the debt, and federal pensions. Look at the U.S. total interest paid alone, over $2 trillion. And of course, that's where your taxpayer money goes, to pay interest on the debt. And the tax money alone doesn't cover all the expenses, so the government authorizes the Federal Reserve Bank to print more money, and that money is loaned from the Federal Reserve Bank to the United States government. As the money is created, it devalues through inflation the value of the money you currently have, which is why so many homes now need two parents to work, even the children, and can barely afford to live, to eat, to shelter. The money is completely fiat, backed by nothing, just the full faith and credit of the federal government. And of course, what does that mean? That the federal government will tax you, the American citizen, will take your money, rob your wealth, rob your grandchildren's wealth, to pay back interest to these bankers. And of course, United States citizens pay the highest corporate tax rate in the world, completely robbed of their wealth, and the big corporations always support these tax increases because they just use loopholes and avoid paying taxes by making agreements with foreign governments, while the mom and pop shops all over the country have their taxes raised in the name of taxing the 1%, hurting the income and money-making potential of all Americans. And of course, the individual tax rates are no better, this according to the BBC, British Broadcasting Channel, in 2014. It estimates that top earners in the United States and the state of New York pay up to 60% in taxes. If you would read The Creature from Jekyll Island, A Second Look at the Federal Reserve Bank, you would find out that there was no federal income tax before 1913, that there was no central bank with a monopoly over the creation of money, and we as a people still figured things out, had infrastructure, and the country ran smoothly. The country certainly doesn't run smoothly today. According to a 2016 Go Banking Rates survey, 69% of Americans have less than $1,000 in their savings accounts. What's more, 34% of Americans have no savings at all. And as you can see in this chart, 34% of Americans have $0 in savings, 35% of Americans have less than $1,000 in savings, 11% of Americans have $1,000 to $5,000 in savings, 4% of Americans have $5,000 to $10,000 in savings, and only 15% of Americans have more than $10,000 in a savings account. Because these families don't have savings, most families, even those approaching retirement, have little or no money in retirement savings. Maybe if the government didn't take it all for Social Security and then waste it, people would actually be able to retire. And with more and more people unable to get jobs in the private sector, they turn to the government for jobs, increasing dependency on the government. And speaking of government dependence, more and more people unable to get jobs are forced to become part of the welfare state, relying on the government to get by in their daily lives, If they are finally able to get a job, it's likely low wage, since the competition of supply and demand is not there. It's been altered by government interference through taxation and the printing and devaluing of money. This creates the incentive for people not to take jobs, to make just enough money to lose their benefits. They become dependent on the government and vote for bigger and bigger government as it becomes their livelihood, increasing the power of government, which is exactly what the politicians and the oligarchs want all along. And they tell us this is all to help the people, as if the people need the government, that we couldn't figure out how to help each other if they would just stay out of our way. What actually happens is politicians live large on the taxpayer bill. People like Nancy Polosi with a net worth of $30 million, paying mortgages on 7 properties, including a 16-acre vineyard in Napa Valley, a multi-million-dollar condo on the D.C. waterfront, and 3,700 square foot house in San Francisco. And in spite of the American people having little to no money in savings, many not having jobs, look how generous the American people are when others are in need. This headline, J.J. Watt on raising $27 million for Harvey relief efforts, humanity steps up for each other. The Red Cross spends over $50 million on Harvey relief. Not that they're a good charity, but the point is that people give them the money. Businesses donate over $157 million to Harvey relief efforts. These companies are donating $1 million or more to Harvey relief efforts. People like Joy Villa going out of their way to help other people in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. But due to the devaluation of the American dollar due to inflationary monetary practices, citizens taxed at a rate that could only be described as tyrannical, far from the 3% tax on tea that led to the American Revolution. Lack of American jobs being available due to the government artificially altering the supply and demand of available jobs, and most Americans not having any savings. I think most of us agree that the government should assist with the Hurricane Harvey relief after Harvey left Texas with an estimated $70 to $108 billion in damages. All we ask is that the government does this responsibly. But will they? Of course not. The Senate has already rejected a bill by Senator Rand Paul that would have diverted funds from going overseas and instead spent them on Hurricane Harvey victims. Instead, corrupt Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell made a motion to table Paul's proposal. McConnell's motion won the support of senators from both parties and passed 87 to 10. You know, the same Mitch McConnell that Steve Bannon came out about this week, saying that his first order of business was to tell President Trump they're not going to drain the swamp.
The Republican establishment is trying to nullify the 2016 election. That's a brutal fact we have to face.
The Republican establishment wants to nullify the 2016 election.
Trying to nullify the 2016 election. Absolutely.
Who?
I think Mitch McConnell, and to a degree Paul Ryan. They do not want Donald Trump's populist, economic, nationalist agenda to be implemented. It's very obvious. It's obvious as night follows day.
Give me a story that illustrates that.
Well, Mitch McConnell, when we first met him, I mean, he said, I think in one of the first meetings in Trump Tower with the president, as we're wrapping up, he basically says, I don't want to hear any more of this drain the swamp talk.
September 8th, 2017, President Trump signed a $15 billion disaster relief package into law Friday afternoon, just hours after it passed the House with a broad bipartisan majority. Instead of the government taking up Rand Paul's bill, which would have diverted money being spent overseas not benefiting Americans, and spending that money instead to help people who are Hurricane Harvey victims, the government decided it would be better to take on $15 billion in additional debt. This is a microcosm of how inefficient the American government has become.
In Washington, we have a disease, or a syndrome rather. I call it the dinosaur syndrome. Big hearts, small brains. Unfortunately, it's a recurring problem, year after year, bill after bill, day after day. In Washington, it is argued that you are more compassionate if you give away more of someone else's money. I would argue that true compassion is in giving your own money away. I would argue that truly rational policy is giving away money that you have. So it's one thing to give away other people's money. It's another thing to give away money that you don't even possess. We as a country have a $20 trillion debt. We borrow $1 million every minute. And yet we are putting forward a bill to allocate $15 billion to those who are suffering under Harvey or from Harvey without paying for it, without finding the money anywhere, with just simply adding it to our tab, adding it to our $20 trillion bill. How did we get to $20 trillion in debt? Big hearts, small brains. Nobody has the courage to say, why don't we pay for it? Why don't we be legislators and stand up like men and women and say, let's set priorities? If it's a priority to help those in Texas, and I have great sympathy for those in Texas. My family is there. I have family members with 2 feet of water in their house. So I have great sympathy for those who are in need. But there's no reason to be foolish. We shouldn't just borrow the money. Why don't we take the money from something less important? My amendment, America First Amendment, would take the money from money that we were going to send to foreign countries. We send billions and billions of dollars to countries who hate us. We send billions and billions of dollars to countries who burn our flag. I think it's a very simple choice that when we're looking at helping those in need in our country, we quit sending money to other countries. What my amendment would do would be pay for the $15 billion in aid by taking it out of the foreign aid account. Who gets the money in the foreign aid account? What is it spent on? I'll give you a couple of examples of what we spend our foreign aid on. We spent billions of dollars. I think it's over $100 billion building roads in Afghanistan, blowing up roads in Afghanistan, building schools, blowing up schools, and then rebuilding all of them. Sometimes we blow them up, sometimes someone else blows them up, but then we always go back and rebuild them. Well, what about rebuilding our country? Why don't we look at our country and rebuild our infrastructure, rebuild our roads? For those who are flooded in Texas, let's help them. Let's help them by not sending the money to Pakistan and to other countries that don't even like us. In the foreign aid account, we spent $273 million last year teaching people how to apply for more of our money. So it's not bad enough that they take your money and send it to foreign countries that don't even like us. We teach these people how to apply for more of our money. We had a televised cricket league we spent over $1 million on in Afghanistan. Televised cricket league. Only problem, they don't really have any televisions. And why it's our obligation, why is the U.S. taxpayer asked to pay for a cricket league in Afghanistan? We spent $45 million on a natural gas station in Afghanistan. $45 million. It was estimated to cost $500,000, 86 times cost overruns. What does it serve up? Gasoline? Natural gas. Who has a car that runs on natural gas in Afghanistan? Nobody. So we bought them cars. We bought them cars that run on natural gas. Then they had no money to buy the natural gas, so we gave them credit cards to buy the natural gas. That's where your money's going. If you want to help the people in Texas or those people who may be hurt in Florida, why don't we quit sending the money overseas? These are the people who chant death to America, and we send more money to them. We spent money on home mortgages in Nigeria. We're spending money on home mortgages in Nigeria. We spent money on tourism in Albania. This is one of my favorites. We spent money teaching people in Kenya how to use Facebook. All I'm asking is, why don't we stand up like men and women, like real legislators, and if we're going to have compassion for those in Texas, why don't we have the good wisdom not to just simply add it to our debt? In hysteria, everyone's hysterical. We must give someone else's money. But not only that, we must give money we don't have. We're going to destroy our country. There have been people who argue that our $20 trillion debt is the #1 threat to our national security. So what I'm asking is, why don't we pay for this? Why don't we simply take some money that we were going to spend somewhere else for something not as valuable in another country, and why don't we spend it here? Because you realize what's going to happen. I will proffer this amendment, and in all likelihood, the swamp, the establishment will vote this down because they never want to cut a dime of spending. They're always compassionate. They have big hearts. They're willing to give away everybody else's money, but they're never, ever willing to pay for it. This is both parties. both Republican Party and Democrat Party. Watch the vote and see who is a conservative and who says we should pay for the aid for Harvey and who says, oh no, we should add it to the tab. Where's the $15 billion going to come from? We this year are going to run a $500 billion debt. There is no money. They're giving away your grandchildren's money to help people. And people will say that's compassion. We're going to help people now. But we're stealing it from our kids' future. We're stealing it from the future and the soundness of our country. And we're threatening the very security of our country with this enormous and elaborate debt. Simply pay for it. Simply say, you know what? This year we can't be so compassionate to people who are wanting to get health care in Cambodia. We have USAID money going to Cambodia to help them get cost-effective or lower-cost insurance. We couldn't even do anything with the health care in our country. We failed to act on it, and we're sending money to Cambodia to help them with their health care? Why don't we act here at home? Why don't we take care of our own problems before we think we can take care of everybody else's problems everywhere around the world? So we will get a chance to vote today. My amendment will come up shortly, and it will simply say, yes, we are a big, rich country. We can help those in Texas. But we will pay for it by taking the money away from somewhere else in the budget that is less of a priority. We give hundreds of millions, really billions of dollars to Pakistan. How much do they like us? Sometimes they help us, but sometimes they harbor the enemy. Sometimes they harbor whole networks of people who are plotting to kill us. What do they think of Christianity in Pakistan? Asia Bibi's a Christian. She's been in jail for 5 years on death row for being a Christian. What do they think of helping us with bin Laden? They didn't raise a finger to help us with bin Laden. Bin Laden lived among them for years and years and years. When we finally got bin Laden, we got bin Laden with information from a doctor named Shakil Afridi. What did Pakistan do to reward the doctor who helped us get bin Laden? Pakistan's got him locked up for life in prison. So really, we need to re-question whether this aid works at all to foreign countries, whether it's counterproductive, whether we have it in the first place. But we should also ask an important question. Maybe that aid ought to be better spent at home. Maybe we ought to start rebuilding our country instead of always thinking we have to rebuild everybody else's country. I think this amendment is so easy to decide, and I think the American people are behind me on this amendment. And I think if we were to take this to a huge vote of the entire American public, I think 75 to 80% of the American public would say, you know what? Let's take care of our problems at home. Let's don't send our money abroad. And I think we'd win this battle. But watch this vote, because in Washington, you'll see the opposite. You'll see 3/4 of this body or more say, oh no, we're not going to cut any spending to anyone. We could never cut foreign aid or welfare for foreign countries. We're just going to add it onto the tab. But I, for one, want to be a loud voice to say it's risking our country's future. It's risking the security of the United States to keep adding to a $20 trillion debt, no matter how good the cause is. And remember, the next time a politician tells you that they are so compassionate because they want to give away more of someone else's money, you ask them how much they gave of their own money if you want to judge their true compassion. Thank you.
Look how out of control the American government has become. We are taxed at what could only be described as a tyrannical rate. Our tax money is wasted at home and overseas. Money is printed to deal with the massive debt accumulated by the welfare and war state, which seems to never end. The printing of money has devalued the money of Americans through inflation, which is the ultimate hidden tax. Today, 2 incomes can't get as much as 1 income used to get. Tax reform is on the horizon. It is up to us, the American people, to make sure we get the tax breaks we were promised when President Trump ran for office. People like Mitch McConnell are going to stand in the way. We must call them out. The tax cuts being discussed are only a slither of the cuts the American people deserve. The federal income tax should be abolished. For now, though, let's make sure we get this small victory. Did you like this video? I hope that you did. I'm going to keep fighting for the American people, fighting for liberty, and fighting for tax cuts. But I need money to fund this operation. For as little as $1 a month, you could gain exclusive access at www.patreon.com, and you could also feel good in that you're supporting a good cause. Thank you.